Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse. Tonight I want to welcome Dave Lubin to the show. Tonight we are continuing our series where we look at the best years in music. Tonight's victim is 1980. We're going to take a look at our favorite albums from that year. So without any further ado, let's get started.
Grant's Rock Warehouse is trying to change the world one track at a time.
Welcome to Grant's Rock Warehouse, and tonight Dave Lubin is back. We are doing an ongoing series where we are looking. Now, I want to say before I introduce this, is that originally this wasn't going to be a series, but now it's a series because we can't stop. This would be our third show. So we were looking at the best years in rock or in music. And we're still going to go with that title. But tonight we are featuring 1980. And you know what, Dave? Welcome to the show. Glad to see you. When I was compiling my list, there's so much great stuff in 1980. It might be better in 1981. Maybe not, but maybe.
Actually, I agree with you. I had a horrible time bringing this down to 10, and in fact, there was a couple of them I'm relying on you to bring up certain albums because I left them out so I could squeeze in some other albums. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of great stuff in 1980. My goodness. And for everyone watching, you might be a little surprised that I'm going to pick certain things, but you know, if I would have chosen these tracks back when I was a kid, it might be a lot different than when I'm going to do it now. So it's going to be fun. We want to hear from you in the chat. What are your favorite tracks from 1980? And go ahead if you want. List your top 10. We want to hear it. I read everything, and I'd love to hear it. So, Dave, I think we'll go 3, 3, and 3.
That sounds like a good plan.
Keep it moving. For the most part, that's what we do. So we'll go 3, 3, and 4 at the end. And just go ahead and talk about it and let us know what you think. And people, like I said, everybody in the chat, let us know how you feel about stuff. All right, Dave, start off with your top 3 or bottom 3, whatever. I listed mine. Of course, I numbered them just to keep track, but they're not really in any kind of ranking order. You can rank them if you'd like.
I went for the ranking today
because
on the last show we did the ranking.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a couple of different kinds of music this time. I hope you don't mind. I'm on the Rock Warehouse, but I'm going to start off with a little bit of adult contemporary, if that's okay. I'm going to start off with a soundtrack, The Jazz Singer by Neil Diamond. So The Jazz Singer was a movie that was released. It was a pretty good movie with maybe some of the worst performances ever, and yet still a very enjoyable film. Neil Diamond was basically just saying lines, but he sang the songs excellent. And frankly, Sir Laurence Olivier as a cantor, I think that might have been his worst moment of his career. He was, but nevertheless, the album is excellent. I do recall I had the 8-track back in the day. I'd play it, and it was just like one of those soundtracks that just sounded good in the car. It was like it was kind of a break from rock going to like adult contemporary. I guess Neil Diamond in the 60s was kind of, I guess, on the cusp of what you call a rock performer, but certainly by the time we got to 1980, absolutely adult contemporary. This album did fantastic. It had 3 songs get to Billboard's top 10, America, Love on the Rocks, Hello Again, but lots of good deep tracks on this. Robert E. Lee, the Summer Love, really good songs. The second song of the album, You Baby. So it's a real good one if you are looking for a soundtrack that's not, let's say, Broadway-like, but it's not rock-like. This is one of those kind of in-between things, and so that's my number 10. My number 9, I've referred to this when we did, was it 1981, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about how much I like Bryan Adams' first 2 albums. So that was the year he actually released his debut.
Yeah.
When we did 1980, I said that You Want It, You Got It is my favorite Bryan Adams. That's absolutely true, but this is a fantastic debut. It does sound more, like I said, more like the Vancouver rock era of that time in Canada. It was Jim Vallance was the producer, but it's got some really great songs on it. I mean, he comes right out of the gate with a song called Hiding from Love, and it's got some. He showed his ability to create a ballad with Give Me Your Love, and showed like some of the ballads that he became known for, like Everything I Do Is For You and all those types of ones. And my favorite song on the album is called Remember. I've talked about on this show before how much I like the group Prism. Jim Valens was also the producer for Prism, and you can hear Prism was like a very synthesizer-based group, and you can really hear like the synthesizer influence in Remember. That song Remember was actually also recorded by Bob Welch, who had a couple of hits in about 1978 or 79. So, and
awesome. Cool.
I got one more for you, and I'm going to another soundtrack. This one, Xanadu.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
And I've talked about on the show before, I'm a huge ELO fan. So needless to say, I like side 2 much better than I do side 1 because that's where you find the ELO songs. Essentially, this album is kind of divided into 2 sections. Olivia Newton-John is essentially side 1, and she does some duets with Cliff Richard, and hey, Gene Kelly was in that movie. It's the movie itself was an absolute hot mess. I've never been able to sit down and watch it because anytime I start watching it, I say, my God, did they really make this? I might have to force myself to watch it at some point. But nevertheless, the ELO stuff is really good inside too. It's got a few hit songs on it, like I'm Alive. Actually, Olivia Newton-John singing with ELO in the background for Xanadu works very well. As I said, the album itself was a big hit. It peaked at number 4. There was 2 million copies sold, and yeah, that's Xanadu. It's a good mix of of Olivia Newton-John, which she was a big pop star at the time, and I had mentioned on the show before. Your audience would know this. Olivia Newton-John, basically Taylor Swift today is what Olivia Newton-John was back then. And as Taylor Swift was kind of a bordering on country, and now she's an all-out pop star.
Oh my God, that's brilliant!
And that's how Olivia Newton-John started off. She was all out. She was a country music star. She morphed into a pop star, doing new wave and things like that. So, anyway, that's my 3. 10, 9,
Brilliant,
and 8.
Dave. That is absolutely brilliant. You are 100% spot on. Brilliant. All right, cool. All right, my number 10. I'll number them just because I have them numbered. Well, if anybody's watched this show, you know I like funk. Now, I think early on in the when rap came out, 1979, 78, that era, there wasn't too much difference between rap and funk as far as I'm concerned. And this example, which you probably are going to be surprised, this is really the first rap album that ever got released on a major label. But when I listened, go ahead.
Sugar Hill Gang?
No.
Okay.
They were never on a major label.
Okay.
Curtis Blow, The Breaks. Now, the story is I bought a funk compilation, I don't know, 10 years ago. I'd never heard The Breaks. But I heard it and I'm going, and this is what's funny, David, it was on a funk compilation. But this track really encompasses both rap and funk. It's more, to me, when I hear it, it's more funk, and I love funk. But he was the first major label artist on a major label that was a funk musician. I mean, rap, so to speak, rap. Of course, the rap then is way different than it is now. I think, well, Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight was another big hit. And I think that kind of came out after Curtis Blow. I could be wrong, but anyway, I got that funk compilation and I played it. I went, oh my God, this is brilliant. In fact, my daughter heard it and she loved it. We used to play it in the car when we'd go pick up her friends and play The Breaks, and all her friends, and she was probably, I don't know, 14, 13 maybe. They all loved it. So all I'm saying is it can transcend the multiple generations. It's a great song. I never get tired of it. And I love the 12-inch version of it. So I would never have normally included something like this, but I'm including it today. My next pick, my number 9, is from a record that I didn't appreciate so much back in the day. Their first album and the second album were my favorites. But now I totally get it. Police were going through a lot of crap at this point. It's a very difficult time. They were pressured to put out another record. There's a lot of drugs. They cranked this album out quickly. And this is the album where a lot of the fighting between the members started because, Sting back in the day didn't really think much of his songwriting, but as he kept going, getting more notoriety, by the time he got to Zenyatta, he's pretty accomplished. So this is a great one. There's a lot of great songs on here other than Don't Stand So Close. You've got Driven to Tears, The World Is Coming Down. Behind My Camel is a instrumental from Andy Summers. Sting didn't like that track, but people always looked at this record with a lot of filler at the time, but maybe it does have filler. But when I look at albums with filler, I like the filler on here. So, but I do think that the pinnacle, the best track is Don't Stand So Close to Me. Absolutely brilliant. Another album in 1980, because a lot of these I'm looking at albums because there's a lot of things when I was a kid that were very influential. Now, Zenyatta was more like in high school when I got a hold of that, but this I absolutely love because I was into this band in the late 70s. My gateway drug, I believe, was 2112 or Hemispheres. It might be a little bit more commercial than what came before. We're getting out of those, 7-8 minute long tracks. I still love this and I don't get tired of it. Crap. Dave's wearing the colors. So you understand what I'm talking about. I think this is my favorite album. I could have mentioned anything off of this record, to be honest, because I love the whole thing. I think this is the perfect record between, the more new wave, moving pictures and keyboard heavy and Hemispheres, the prog. To me, this is the peak. Some people may not agree, but that's all right. We want to hear from you in the chat. Let us know about Rush Spirit of the Radio. We want to hear from you. So anyway, there's my 3. What's your 7?
Yeah,
6 and 5.
Sure, and just on Rush, for me that's their best album, start to finish.
There you go.
I mean, in terms of like a side, I love side 1 of 2112, but in terms of like start to finish, that Permanent Ways is my favorite. And yeah, I mean, there's Spirit of the Radio is still a great song to listen to. Always just one of those you want to crank up. And then there's all kinds of great deep tracks on that. Jacob's Ladder, Different Strings. It's a great album. So
my case is closed. There you go.
Yeah, right. And that was the one I said, yeah, I'm going to rely on Grant to pick that one, and I'm glad you did because I wanted to get a couple other albums in there. So,
all right.
Here was one that I just couldn't leave off, and that is Pat Benatar, Crimes of Passion. Pat Benatar was our lady rock icon of the 1980s. On August 1st, 1981, she was the second person to be played on MTV. It was You Better Run from this album was played. It was a remake of a Rascals hit from way back when. The interesting thing about Pat Benatar in this particular... there it is. Interesting thing about Pat Benatar was, I'll be honest with you, when I heard Heartbreaker, I thought, kind of catchy, but I got tired of that song pretty quickly, and I kind of thought she was a flash in the pan. I was very, very wrong. This album was a huge hit, sold 4 million copies total, 500,000 in Canada. I bring that up because at the time I was living in Canada, so I heard all kinds of songs on this album. My personal favorite song from this album was Hell is for Children. That was one written by Neil Giraldo and her, and they showed the ability to produce a perfect song for some with a female rocker voice like her and having her range, but also brought awareness to a social issue at the same time. And she had her first top 10 hit with Hit Me With Your Best Shot. So way to go, Pat Benatar. You proved me wrong. And heck, that's why I'm not in the business of picking stars and picking music or picking people who get record deals. Anyway, well, I'm going to now put a guilty pleasure up. I'm going to basically say, yep, I like this band. I went to see this band live. Air Supply.
What's nothing wrong with Air Supply?
Lost in Love. So back in the day in Montreal, I brought this up before, there was a rock station called Chom FM, and occasionally I would deviate and listen to another station that was popular called CKGM, and they played more top 40, so they played some rock, but they also played, and that's where I would hear Air Supply, and I remember the first time I heard All Out of Love. It was a ballad that hooked me. It's still my favorite song by them. And I really did like the album. It didn't hurt the fact that girls liked Air Supply, so have something in common with the girls at that time. And the charting's interesting. The album itself peaked at number 22, And yet it had 3 top 10 singles: Lost in Love, All Out of Love, Every Woman in the World. Sold 2 million copies total. And there's a lot of good deep tracks in here. A couple that I wrote down here: American Hearts, Having You Near Me. So, hey, I admit it. I like Air Supply. I confess. All right.
I don't have a problem with that.
Back in
Saw them on the 80s cruise. They still brought it.
Yeah, I saw. Actually, I noticed that you had you had an interview with them. In fact, so.
Well, yeah, I posted the interview with who gave the interview? I think it was
Graham.
No, Alan Hunter from MTV
okay.
did the interview with him.
Okay.
So it's pretty good. They were great. I'm glad I got to see them. The thing is with those 80 cruises, I never ever thought I would ever see, and I would never see Air Supply had it not been for that. So, but I'm glad I got to see them. So they were good.
Air Supply was the last concert I saw pre-COVID. I actually saw them in Akron downtown, and then the whole COVID thing happened long after that, and it'd been a little while after that we couldn't see live music. So back in 1980, I saw this guy for the very first time, and a total of 3 times, Billy Joel.
Yeah.
He put out Glass Houses, and boy, was he on a roll, because this one followed 52nd Street, another huge hit for him, and for good reason. It's a great album. In total, by the way, I mentioned this was the first time I saw Billy Joel. I actually saw him a total of 3 times. He had his first #1 hit on this album with It's Still Rock and Roll to Me. And the album reached #1 on Billboard, as did 52nd Street. So he had a #1 album previous to that. You May Be Right also reached top 10. But my favorite songs on the album are more deeper cuts. So one of them is All for Lena, which he did play at the concert, and I was very happy that he did. And it was actually a very cool concert. He had 4 pianos, and he was running from one piano to the next piano and doing his different riffs on different pianos depending on how the song went. It was really cool. He doesn't do that anymore.
I wonder why he did that. Aren't they all tuned the same? It just seems weird.
I don't. And they were 4 different kinds of pianos. I don't think they were tuned the same. And I think depending on how it worked, it was. And he was wearing running shoes, and I still recall that. If you see him now, he doesn't do that now. He just plays one piano.
He doesn't run.
Yeah, yeah. So, I was going to mention other good deep tracks on this album. I Don't Want to Be Alone Anymore, Sleeping with the Television On, Close to the Borderline. It's a great album, start to finish. So, and one thing about his concerts is that if you go on a set list, you'll see he does change them around from night to night. I've actually heard him in interviews, and many groups nowadays, they figure out, okay, we're playing these 12 songs, and that's the 12 songs we're playing. And he said, no, he will mix it up. So he'll play some of these deeper tracks and at some of these concerts. So it really depends on the night you go. Another group that I noticed does that is Cheap Trick. They seem to put out a different set list all the time. So,
well, you know how they do that, Dave? They throughout the tour, each band member takes a night, and they put together the set, and then it goes to somebody else. So Rick Nielsen might do one night, next night's Robin Zander, the next night's Tom Peterson, and that's how they do it. So I saw him once on a show at the Columbus Fairgrounds. Oh, it must have been Bunny was still drumming. Dax was filling in for Bunny because Bunny had spinal surgery. Or back surgery. I don't know what he had done, but he was out. But the track selection was unbelievable. They opened up with Lookout, which I almost had an explosion, but it was great. And Tom Peterson was picking all these obscure tracks. It was great. So with Cheap Trick, you never quite know what you're going to get.
No, you cannot just look at that FM set list or whatever that website is. And
they're going to play whatever they want.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things they're always going to play The Flame and I Want You to Want Me and songs like that, but they'll change up the rest of the set list. So they still sound pretty good. I haven't seen them in a while, but I've heard them on radio and some live stream concerts and things, and they still sound darn good. So
cool. All right, that was 4.
That's my forum.
I mean 3. We're not to 4 yet.
Yeah,
Brain problem. All right, my
waiting
number
for you
7.
For 7, 6, and 5 from you.
All right, my number 7. I'm going to go with a band that you could. Is it punk influence? Is it new wave? Is it art rock? Is it avant-garde? What would you classify this band? But they did have one hit in 1980 that went to the top 40. Comes off of an album that I think some fans may think they're not quite as good as the debut or maybe the second album. but it's a damn good record as far as I'm concerned. When I listen to this record, I feel that everything has come together. And this is a big hit that I don't think I ever get tired of. I'm going to go with Devo and Whip It. Now, this was kind of like a double-edged sword for Devo, because Warner Brothers, after this was a big hit, they wanted another Whip It. And I don't know if they ever quite achieved that. And, let's be honest, Devo wasn't like a hit-making machine. They weren't out looking to like change the world with a 45 or anything. But I don't know. I think Freedom of Choice might be their peak. Everybody might have a different idea about it, but I think it's great. I don't have any problem. But Whip It, every time it comes on, I still listen to it. I have no problem with it. We are also, I'm going to stay in that new wave vein. Now, this band, I would think, is totally new wave. Eventually, they probably got out of it, but we're talking 1980, and new wave was really just starting to pick up. So I'm going to go with a band from Athens, Georgia. This is their second album. They had a big hit previous year with the song Rock Lobster. Big song. I don't know if it really sold a whole lot, but they're really known for that song, or at least they were. I'm going to go with 1979 Wild Planet. Basically, this is a clone of the first album. They don't really branch out on anything here. It's just more of the same. That came a lot later, where they really started to mix up their styles. Well, Mesopotamia, the next record, David Byrne produced most of it, and it came out as an EP, and it was kind of fresh and new, and I loved it, but there was no full album. But I love the B-52s. They're fun, they're engaging, they're loose, and it's just all about having a good time when you listen to the records. But Private Idaho, in my brain, when I hear it, I never turn it off. I think it's their peak. That is their song. And it rocks. It's catchy. It's wonderful. So that's my number 6. My number 5. Now, how can I do 1980 without mentioning this? We're talking a record. These guys became studio musicians. Some of their members had quit. They retired to the studio. They became basically a duo. And 1980 was the end of the line. Until much later, until the 90s, where they reconvened. I'm going to go Steely Dan, and it is a yacht rock staple. It is smooth. When you think smooth, this whole album is smooth. And the album we're talking about is Gaucho, Babylon Sisters, Hey 19, Glamour Profession. Very smooth. This is the slickest, smoothest record they ever did. If you know this track, Hey 19, then Gaucho is more of the same. Some people don't think this is quite as good a record as Asia, but it's a little bit different. But I think it's great. And Hey 19 for 1980, come on. That's great. So that's my number 5.
Some of your choices today, it's like I can just see the videos. When you mentioned Don't Stand So Close to Me, it's like, oh, that's bringing me back to that video with the teacher and the apple and that whole thing. And of course, the Whip It video by Devo. I mean, who can forget that one? That was an MTV staple for sure. So
with the whip that when he hit the female, it took her skirt off. You probably couldn't do that now, Dave.
No, there's a lot of things you couldn't do now.
No,
that were on
that
those
was
videos.
The 80s. All right, so what's your number 4?
All right, number 4. Someone, I feel like we haven't brought this guy up, and boy, he's got quite a catalog of music, but I'm going to pay him a lot of respect for this album. Bob Seger, Against the Wind.
Yeah.
So that was a great album. And it was his biggest hit up to that point. So my personal favorites on these would be Fire Lake and You'll Accompany Me. But it is just loaded with songs. I mean, I feel like that whole album got played on rock radio. I mean, I feel like every time I turned on the radio, I was hearing Horizontal Bop, Betty Lou's Getting Out Tonight, Her Strut. That was a fun one. Remember that one?
Yeah, there was a lot of great stuff, and they used to play a lot of that on FM rock radio here. But you know what? I don't know if it's just the way things work, but I rarely hear any Bob Seger anymore. Now that's on terrestrial radio, but on XM and Sirius, I'm not sure what they play so much. Well, I've got it, but I'm not listening to it all the time.
I feel like terrestrial radio. I still hear. Not the only song I'll still hear from this album is the title track, Against the Wind. But but I still feel like I hear old time rock and roll quite a bit. Still the same. I feel like I still hear quite a bit on all radio, Sirius XM.
Yeah, I don't hear very
Uh,
much here in Ohio.
but anyway, that's Bob Seger is probably my favorite of that kind of like power rock male singer
Mhm.
type of guy. I was a moderate Springsteen fan. He's got two amazing albums, and the rest of his catalog I'm okay with. One guy of this era or this sound that I was not a fan of at all is John Cougar Mellencamp. He's a total channel changer for me. I do not like listening to John Cougar Mellencamp. Anytime I hear any of his songs come on, it's like I don't know what it is, but don't like John Cougar Mellencamp songs. Don't know.
That's
But
okay.
it's funny because I would put him in that same category as Bob Seger or Bruce Springsteen, but I don't know. Don't like those songs. All right, the next one, I have a feeling you might pick this album, but I have to pick it because these guys had such a meteoric rise in the United States, and that's Loverboy's debut album. This one is still my favorite of theirs, although I like quite a few of their albums. What a debut! It was like a catchy new wave mixed with some rock. It became iconic here in the USA very quickly. What I remember about this album is I went to visit my brother was going to law school in Florida at the time, and I was telling him about, I think Loverboy is becoming popular, and I also told him April Wine's becoming popular. And we were hearing Sign of the Gypsy Queen a fair bit, but for every time we heard Sign of the Gypsy Queen, we heard Turn Me Loose about 4 times as many times. And I really liked them, but I was also kind of mad that they lapped April Wine so badly. It was, they for instance, just to give you an idea, this album peaked at number 11 on Billboard. Nature of the Beast peaked at number 26. Later that year, I went to go see the Nature of the Beast tour. Who opened up for them at the Montreal Forum? It was Loverboy, but I mean, it was kind of one of those things. Who should be opening up for who? So anyway, other great songs in this album: "Lady of the '80s," "Kid Is Hot Tonight," "Teenage Overdose," "DOA." I think it's a great debut album, and it's actually probably my favorite. Although the next one, "Get Lucky," was pretty close as well.
Yeah,
So,
I give the nod to Get Lucky, but that's just me.
yeah, well, it's 2 great albums, and the third one was really good too.
But I just want to mention down in the links below, Tim Derling and I did an album ranking of Loverboy. So check it out below. We actually were pretty impressed with these later Loverboy records. A lot to offer on these late, they're all independently released. But I mean, if you like Loverboy, check out that video down below.
They still perform.
Yeah, they're still gigging. Yeah. It's all good.
So number 2, I've got a little bit of a deeper one. These guys had a few rock radio hits back in the day, but this was my favorite album they did. It was the first album I was introduced to them, and it was Split Enz True Colors. So I had never heard of this album at all. It was a friend of mine brought this one to my attention, and I got hooked. And if anybody has never heard this album, I promise you, every song 1 through 11 is a fantastic song. There's not a channel changer on it. They had one moderate hit song, "I Got You," and and I'm surprised it didn't do better. It's a really catchy song. It was one of those songs the first time I heard it, I said, "Oh, that's great." What's interesting is it peaked at 53 on Billboard, but it actually hit 13 in Canada. So probably got a lot more airplay up in Montreal at the time than it did down here. But they did go on to have a couple of hits, "One Step Ahead," "6 Months in a Leaky Boat." So they did okay. But this album is fantastic. It was interesting when it was released at the time. If you bought the LP, they had this special thing that if you held it up to the light, it had like a little prism of colors into it. So it was kind of known for that. And all kinds of highlights on this album. You have "Shark Attack," "Poor Boy." They had a ballad called "I Hope I Never." I mean, it's filled with stuff. I saw them play this tour at McGill University in Montreal, and even though they had 5 albums previously, the entire concert pretty much was this. They played this entire album. Maybe they left out one song, I think, on the entire album, and then maybe they played a couple of earlier tracks, but the focus was definitely this album. So that's one for people who might have missed that one. Great album.
All right, let me add this. The single here in the States, I can't speak for Canada or any place else, but when they released "I Got You" in the States, it was on a picture sleeve, and it was laser etched too. So the 45 and the record was. The other record that at the same time came out was Styx Paradise Theater, and it had a laser etching on side 2. So those were the only 2 records from A&M that they released like that, other than that 45.
So did you have that one back in the day as well? Or
no, I still have it.
Okay. Right.
But I would go look at it and bring it out, but it would take me too long. But I do have it. Yeah. It's incredible. And I've got the vinyl of that with the etching. So
yeah, this is just cool. A CD. It's there's no etching on the CD, so
no, they didn't care by then. I don't know how you'd etch a CD anyway, but no, they don't care. No.
All right, so that's my number 2.
Number 2, what's your number 1?
Okay, so you want me to do my number 1? And sure. I've often said this is one of my favorite bands. Mentioned Yellow is one of my favorite bands. April Wine is one of my favorite bands, and these guys are absolutely one of my favorite bands.
Oh my God, that's your number 1.
That is my number 1. I love this album. Okay. I remember I could not wait for this album to come out after Candio, and I felt like I was waiting forever. And back in 1980, it came out in the at the end of the summer of 1980, and I'd spent the summer at summer camp. And I remember my brother picked me up at the bus, and I get into the car, and they were playing Misfit Kid, and I said, finally, the new Cars album is out, because I knew, obviously, I recognized it right away as the Cars, and I knew right away that it was not, that I knew that it was a new song. It was not on Candio or the debut. And yeah, I love this. As I said, for me, it was my favorite. The public doesn't necessarily agree with me. It was kind of like lost in the shuffle a little bit after the huge success of the first 2 albums. I mean, it did okay. But it only had one top 40 hit, Touch and Go, which I think is another great song. It peaked at number 37. I mean, Cars albums, they're just mixed so well, and the songs mix into one of so excellent. But I think the reason I like this one is that I find the songs flow from one to another better than any other Cars album. And the other thing interesting for me about this album, Grant, is that it's one of those albums where I like side 2 better than side 1. So if you look at side 2, it's Misfit Kid, Down Boys, You Wear Those Eyes, Running to You. It just, those would be like my favorite songs on the album. Yeah. So yeah,
great tracks.
Yeah, and they have a cool ballad on there. You Wear Those Eyes is a cool new wave style ballad, and it was kind of maybe a precursor to Drive, which was one of the band's biggest songs. So
could be, wouldn't argue against that.
Yeah, because he didn't. If you think about the first 2 albums, there was nothing on those 2 albums that would classify as a rock ballad. So.
No, I can't hear. Yeah, you're 100% right. I don't hear anything on those. All right, cool. That's your number 1.
That's my 4 through 1.
All right, my number 4 is one of my all-time favorite albums, but the track I'm going to pick, I could have picked one of many, but I'm going to go. We're talking 1980. This seriously, I never get tired of this album, but I'm going to go with the Pretenders, their debut album, 1980. It's angry. Is it punk? Is it new wave? Exactly what is it? I mean, Chrissie Hynde says F off during the song. It's so angry. But it's the opener, and it takes you by storm when you hear it. James Honeyman Scott's guitar on it is wonderful. In fact, his playing on this whole record, absolutely stunning. He's one of my favorite guitar players. May he rest in peace. But, you've also got Brass and Pocket, Mystery Achievement. There's there's not one bad song on this record. So I actually could have chosen any of them, and it would have filled that void. But might as well go with Precious, because it does start the record off, and it does such an impact. So it's good. My number 3. Of course, I think that the album cover here is a little bit questionable, but you cannot argue how great the songs are on here. Is this soul? Is this funk? Is this new wave? This record encompasses all of that. Is it obscene? It could be considered now. You could release this record. A lot of the track topics are questionable, but it's great. And it's got the artist standing in his underwear on the cover. I'm going to go with Prince, Dirty Mind. This is one of the early records where Prince was doing everything. He recorded everything. It sounds very intimate. It sounds very in your face. But the melodies, song structure, lyrics, it's all top notch. Prince is one of those artists that ended up doing a lot of stuff in the studio. He became a master of the studio. He could do it all, but this was pretty early on. This was his third album, and he's just really starting to master the studio. But you cannot tell anything on here is a raw. It's a beautiful record. I love it. A lot of this has this record was very influential back in the day, and it did really influence a lot of what was going on in the music industry. This is his first big record. Is it as big as Purple Rain or 1999? No, but it's very influential. It only got up to 45 on the album charts. It had one single was Uptown. I don't think When You Were Mine was a single, but we do know that Cyndi Lauper did a version of it and had a hit with it. Great song. In her interpretation, she did a lot with it, but it's definitely the single off of here. I don't know why they didn't choose it for a single, but whatever. It is what it is. It's a great track. My number 2, I'm going to go with a band that this is really my gateway drug to this band. A friend of mine turned me on to them, and when I was a kid, I don't think I had my license yet, but he did. But we would play this all the time in his car, and I'm talking XTC, Black Sea, but it's in that same vein as the Kinks, where the Kinks used to talk a lot about everyday life in their songs. This is one of those things. It's catchy, it rocks. Some of Steve Lillywhite's best productions. Hugh Padgham was the engineer. It fits right. It checks, Dave, it checks every box for me. In fact, this album, I love it still. I never get tired of it.
The one I remember from that, I don't know if it was that album, but my favorite one from them was Making Plans for Nigel. I think it was that album.
Making Plans for Nigel was on Drums and Wires, which is over there. There it is.
Yeah.
Behind me.
Yeah, I never hear that one anymore. That's a shame.
That's a lot more, well, it's a little bit more, I don't want to say dissonant. It's not dissonant. It's not quite as polished as Black Sea. I'll just leave it at that. But I love Drums and Wires. I think once they got Dave Gregory in the band, that's when the band really started. That's when the band really started off. That's what I think. It took them a couple records, but man, Drums and Wires is where everything took off.
They were senses working overtime, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
All right. My next pick, and I love this record. This reminds me of when I was a kid. We'd go shoot the loop in downtown Marion, Ohio, which you'd get in a car, you'd play certain songs. So we would play Journey Escape. I swear to God. Go around and around downtown in the car. We didn't have like a hot rod. It was a friend of mine. I couldn't even drive. But Journey Escape, Dave, and REO Speedwagon, High Infidelity. Over and over we would play that. So High Infidelity is burned into my subconscious, but and I love this record. Some people may think, well, come on, they rocked harder before. Well, maybe they did, but I think High Infidelity there's nothing weak on it. All the songs are great. The production's great. Everything's great. It was their number one seller. But the track on here that I really enjoy, that I think is the key track, is Take It on the Run, which is a Gary Richrath song. I think it's absolutely stunning. Like I said, there's no weak tracks on here. All the sequencing on this record's perfect. The tracks flow together well. Nothing stands out like you don't listen to it and go, "Oh, why'd they put that on there?" I think is great. I think it's great. A lot of the critics probably didn't like it as much, but I think Robert Christgau, who I always bring up, who hates everything, liked this record. So that means something to me. But Take It on the Run got up to number 5 on the Billboard chart. And that, along with Keep On Loving You, was a big track, even though they had 4 tracks off of this record. This isn't necessarily my number one. As I go through these exercises, I'm just listing them, and I got to keep track of them somehow, so I just number them. So technically, I guess this is my number one. Not really, but I love this record. I still love it.
Well, so I love this record too. However, I made an error because when we did our 1981 show, I said it's my favorite album of 1981, and I come to find out it was actually released in 1980. But I felt like it was released in 1981 because I so associate that album with 1981. But yeah, I
But the
agree.
thing
That's
is, it came out late 1980.
so.
So, but it still counts as 1980, but it was one of the biggest selling albums in 81. So, Dave, you're kind of right.
I'm
But,
forgiven.
yeah, it's fine. I think the more you can bring up this record, the better.
My favorite song on the album is it is the very first song, and that's "Don't Let 'Em Know," because it just starts off the whole thing. It's like, okay, this is and they often will start their concerts with that song. But I mean, the whole album's great.
Yeah, it's good. Great record. So there you go. Do you have anything else? Any honorable mentions or anything you want to bring up?
I do. So I mentioned I made an error. So first of all, let me start off with an error and a gross omission when we talked about 1979, because this absolutely would make my top 10 albums, and I just somehow completely missed it. So it's a little bit of a deeper one. So I just, I wanted to make sure your audience know about this. This is called The Records. Now, this was a power pop new wave band, and they never really did much anywhere outside of Great Britain.
Nope.
But they had one Billboard hit, "Starry Eyes," which is a fantastic, catchy power pop song. But this whole album is a fantastic album. There's all kinds of great stuff. It starts off great. There's a song called "All Messed Up and Ready to Go." Goes up into another fun song called "Tina Rama." I won't go through the whole thing. My favorite song on the album is the first one on side 2. It's a song called "Girl." So again, I missed this. So if you go back to our 1979 show, I think this would rank somewhere around number 6 or 7. So I wanted to bring that up. And I had 2 others that didn't quite make the list, but they deserve honorable mentions. And the first one is this one. I was really trying hard to put this in my top 10. It really was, because there's some great songs and some great hits, just like "Starting Over." "Beautiful Boy" is a really nice, pretty song. "Woman," of course, was played all the time. Mm-hmm. The problem why I cannot put this into the top 10, and I don't want to get, the Yoko Ono songs just do not sound good to me. And given that they were never played on radio, I don't think they sound too good to too many people. But nevertheless, that is the problem why I could not put that into the top 10, because there's just too many Yoko Ono songs. Right. They don't work for me. There's other people out there that are enjoying them and like her. That's great. But because I just couldn't put it in my top 10. The other album I want to pay mention to is I really respected these guys for coming out with something. Leonard Skinner was one of my absolute favorite bands. I think "One More for the Road" is the best concert album ever. It's better than "Live at Budokan" or some other ones. But their debut album is fantastic. "Street Survivor's" fantastic album. And if we go backwards into the 70s, you'll definitely see those on my list. So I was really looking forward to Rosden Collins putting out this. So they, 4 of the members came up with the idea, said, okay, we can't totally create Leonard Skinner. We're going to properly respect Ronnie Van Zant. We're going to get a female singer. And they've put out a pretty good album. Mm-hmm. They've got 2 great songs, "Primetime" and "Don't Misunderstand Me," that did get a decent amount of radio play on rock radio back in the day. And there's some other good things on this album as well. I do like Del Krantz's voice, but I find that for a whole album, she doesn't carry a whole album. I think "Don't Misunderstand Me," she did a debut. I think they could have done more of that sort of thing with her. She's a good singer for sure. Yeah, she's got a little bit of a Janis Joplin type thing going on. But it just, this was another one I was trying to think, who am I going to cut to put this album into my top 10? Couldn't quite get it there, but they put out a pretty darn good album. It went gold. And they put out only one more album after that. They kind of faded, and then they kind of concluded, I think our best bet is to just come up with some sort of Leonard Skinner revival band. And they eventually did find a singer. I don't even remember who they used. Did they use Donnie Van Zant at one point? He was 38 Special. They used another Van Zant maybe. At one point.
Or anyway, Johnny.
They used Johnny. That's who they used. Yeah, they used Johnny for a little while.
And then he became a full member of it.
Yeah,
I think he might be the only one there now.
I think they're all dead, unfortunately.
They're all dead.
They're all dead. The only one still alive is Ricky Medlock, who was on their album First and Last. And ironically, he was kind of cut from the band in the very early days, and now he came back to the band as the only one left.
Because he's alive.
He's alive. That's all they needed. So, but I think they still perform. But anyway,
I think they were going to retire, but I don't know what the latest is. I thought they were going to retire, but I'm just some guy. I don't recall. I haven't heard anything more about it.
My joke during the COVID period was my hair was getting so long I was getting ready to join the Leonard Skinner revival band.
Nice. You'd be good.
So there you go. Yeah, that's my honorable mentions.
Cool. All right. Awesome. Well, we can wrap this dog up. I want to thank Dave Lubin for coming on. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Please leave a comment down there. We do look at the comments. Let us know. What are your records that were, massive records like this? It's just tracks from 1980 that changed your life. We want to hear from you. It's just about turning you on to music. So hopefully between Dave and I, you can get something out of it. Maybe you want to go out and check out these tracks. So leave a comment. What's back? What's next? Hold on. 3, 2, 1. What's next for Dave and I? We'll figure out something. We'll probably do another year because these exercises are so much fun and I enjoy them so much. So stay tuned. You'll see Dave back here. The other thing is Dave, is there anything else you want to talk about or promote or anything?
I do. Yeah, we're getting ready to start the Sound of Soundtracks. So actually, my list today included 2 soundtracks. So I was kind of hinting the fact that someday I might have to watch Xanadu if I want to do this show, because what I want to do is I want to do a deep dive into these soundtracks.
Mm-hmm.
How well do the soundtracks support the movie? Can you get the soundtrack without ever having seen the movie? Like, I've never seen Xanadu, but I sure like the music. And so we're going to do a deep dive into that. And Grant, as I said, I'm hoping you're going to be on the show. So,
Dave, I'm here for you. Whatever you need me to do. So
get ready. I'm hoping if all goes well, we're going to debut that on August 1st, which is also the same thing that MTV started. So there you go.
Oh, coincidence. All right.
All goes well.
Cool. It's going to be a great discussion. Looking forward to it. Mr. Lubin, thanks for coming on. It's always fun talking music with you.
Thank you, Grant.